What if I told you that Supernatural, the show that fought demons, angels, pagan gods, cosmic entities, and literal death itself, never once faced the one threat that could have completely broken Sam and Dean? Not because the writers forgot, not because the budget wasn't there, but because nobody thought to ask the question, what happens when the Winchester brothers go up against something that has no soul to threaten, no fear to exploit, no humanity to appeal to, a machine built for one single purpose? To kill. And it cannot be reasoned with. It cannot be scared. It cannot be exorcised. What happens then? That question is finally being answered. And the way it's being answered is something no one saw coming. For 15 years, Supernatural did something almost no other show on television managed to pull off. It reinvented itself constantly. Season after season, Sam and Dean Winchester didn't just fight monsters. They fought every kind of monster. Werewolves, vampires, shapeshifters, leviathans, reapers, tricksters, kitsune, rougarou, wendigo. The show went from small-town horror to heaven and hell mythology, so elaborate it could rival most fantasy novels. It introduced Lucifer. It killed God. It literally ended the universe and rebooted it. It had episodes styled as noir films, animated adventures, animated comedy, a western, a musical, an actual, full-blown musical episode with original songs. The show was fearless in how far it was willing to stretch its own boundaries. But here's the thing. Here's the gap that fans quietly noticed over the years. The gap that never got filled no matter how many seasons came and went. Science fiction. Not the soft, vague kind where angels have quantum explanations or where a ghost is connected to a modern device. Real, hard-edged, chrome and circuitry science fiction. The kind where the threat isn't supernatural at all. The kind where the enemy was built in a factory, programmed with a directive, and has no concept of mercy because mercy was never in the code. Supernatural flirted with technology. There was Halt and Catch Fire, the episode about a ghost haunting a Wi-Fi network. There was LARP and the Real Girl. There were gadgets, EMF readers, and the occasional haunted object that came with a modern twist. But none of it ever crossed into true sci-fi territory. The show always kept one foot firmly in the supernatural, pun fully intended. The threat always had a metaphysical root. There was always a spirit, a curse, a demon, something you could trace back to the other side. Until now, a new supernatural comic series from Dynamite Entertainment has arrived, and it is doing something that 15 seasons of television never attempted. It is dropping Sam and Dean Winchester. Specifically the Sam and Dean of Season 1 and 2, young scrappy, still grieving their father, still driving the Impala through the American heartland. It is dropping them directly into a confrontation with killer robots. Not haunted robots. Not possessed robots. Not machines being puppeted by a ghost or controlled by a demon wearing a human suit. Actual, autonomous, mechanical killers. Machines. And the brothers have absolutely no playbook for this. Let's slow down and appreciate how significant that is, because it's easy to hear killer robots and think it sounds like a gimmick. A fun little detour. A quirky what-if. But the more you sit with it, the more you realize this isn't just a fun story choice. It's the story that was always missing. The comic is set in the canon timeline between seasons 1 and 2, which is the exact window where everything feels the most grounded, the most raw. John Winchester has just died. Sam is wrestling with the darkness inside him, the thing the yellow-eyed demon unlocked, the thing he doesn't fully understand yet. Dean is quietly falling apart while pretending to be absolutely fine. They're two brothers with a muscle car, a trunk full of weapons, and a codependency so deep it borders on mythological, which in their world, it eventually becomes. This is the era when Monster of the Week episodes hit hardest because the emotional undercurrent was always churning just beneath the surface. And into that world, that emotionally raw, morally complicated, grief-soaked world, someone has introduced killer robots. The format of the comic leans directly into the classic Monster of the Week structure that made early Supernatural so beloved. The brothers get a lead. They investigate. Something goes wrong. The stakes escalate. And then they have to figure out how to survive something they have never encountered before. That formula worked for a reason. It was never about the monster itself. It was always about what the monster forced the characters to reveal about themselves. So what does a killer robot force them to reveal? Think about how every previous threat Sam and Dean faced could be engaged with on some level beyond pure physics. A demon can be exorcised if you know the words. A vampire can be killed if you have the right blade. A ghost can be put to rest if you find the remains. Even things like Leviathans, those ancient corporate horrors from the first beast god ever made, even they had a specific weakness that could be researched, hunted down, exploited. There was always a crack in the armor. There was always a ritual, a lore entry, a dead language inscription that Bobby Singer could find in one of his books if you gave him enough time. What's the lore entry for a machine that has no soul? There's no Latin exorcism for a processor. There's no binding spell for an algorithm. You can't trap a robot in a devil's trap. You can't appeal to its humanity because it doesn't have any. You can't threaten its family because it doesn't have one of those either. You cannot scare it because fear is a biological response, and this thing is not biological. Everything that Sam and Dean know, everything they've spent their entire lives learning, is suddenly completely useless. That's not just a new enemy. That's an existential crisis dressed up in metal plating. Now, some of you are already thinking about the episodes where supernatural touch technology. Halt and Catch Fire is the obvious one. A ghost haunting a Wi-Fi network, killing people through their devices. But the ghost is still a ghost. The rules still apply. You find the anchor, you burn it, you put the spirit to rest. The technology is just the delivery mechanism for something that is fundamentally familiar. Same thing with bloodlines, same thing with gadgets and haunted objects across the series. The supernatural element is always still there, lurking underneath the modern surface. What the comic is doing is fundamentally different. The robots are the threat. Full stop. No ghost inside the machine. No demon riding the hardware. Just engineering. Just code. Just cold mechanical purpose. And this is where things get genuinely exciting from a storytelling perspective, because the supernatural universe has rules. Careful, established, deeply thought-out rules about what exists, what hunts, what can be killed, and how. Introducing a threat that doesn't fit any of those categories doesn't break the universe. It expands it. It asks a question the show never asked. In a world full of things that go bump in the night, what happens when a thing going bump has no night, no soul, no mythology, just function? This is the horror sci-fi hybrid that fans have quietly been waiting for without always being able to articulate why. Because think about it. Horror and science fiction have been dancing around each other for decades. The Terminator is a horror movie that happens to involve time travel. Alien is a haunted house film set in space. The best sci-fi horror works because it takes the primal fear, something is hunting me and I don't know if I can stop it, and strips away every comfort. With a supernatural threat, there's always the comfort of mythology. There are rules, and if you know the rules, you have a fighting chance. With a machine, that comfort evaporates. The machine doesn't care about your mythology. It doesn't care about your salt lines. It just keeps coming. Now imagine Dean Winchester in that situation. Dean, who has faced the literal devil and cracked a joke. Dean, who stared down death, the cosmic embodiment of the end of all things, and offered him pickled chips. Dean, who processes every terrifying new development with sarcasm so sharp it functions as actual armor. Put Dean in front of a killer robot and watch that sarcasm short-circuit in real time. He'd probably open with something like, "Okay, so we're doing this now? This is a thing." And then he'd try to punch it. And then he'd immediately regret that decision. And somewhere between the first swing and the realization that his hand is probably broken, there would be this flicker behind his eyes. Genuine confusion. Real uncertainty. Because for the first time in his hunting career, the thing in front of him is not in the book. There is no book for this. Sam, on the other hand, Sam would do what Sam always does. He would research. He would sit down with whatever he has available, whatever scraps of information he can pull together, and he would approach this like an engineering problem, because that's what it is. Sam, Who got into Stanford? Who has a lawyer's mind wrapped around a hunter's instincts? Sam would start asking about the machine's origin. Who built it? What was it designed to do? Is there a kill switch? There's always a kill switch, right? Except in the best horror stories, there isn't. Or the kill switch is somewhere you can't get to without walking directly through the thing trying to kill you. And that's where the tension lives. That's where this story finds its teeth. Because in a fight against a supernatural entity, knowledge is power. Find the lore, find the weakness when the fight. But in a fight against something mechanical, knowledge alone might not be enough. You can know exactly how the machine works and still not be able to stop it. The brothers would have to do something they almost never have to do in the supernatural world. They'd have to improvise against something that doesn't improvise. They'd have to be more adaptive than something that never adapts because it never needs to. That's a fight where being human, being fallible, being creative, being desperate might actually be the only advantage they have. Or it might not be enough. And that's the question that makes this story genuinely, honestly scary in a way that the later seasons of Supernatural sometimes struggled to achieve. When the stakes are cosmological, when you're talking about the fate of every soul in existence, it's hard to feel the weight of it. But when two brothers are in a dark building somewhere in Middle America, and there's something coming down the hallway that their bullets can't stop, that their sigils can't slow, that their words can't affect, suddenly it feels very close, very immediate, very human. For the fans who grew up with this show, who watched it in high school or college or late at night when they needed something to watch and never stopped needing it, this feels like finding a lost episode. Not a fan film, not a what if, a legitimate, canonical, beautifully timed addition to the story that asks the question the original show never got around to asking. There's something emotionally resonant about that, because the early seasons of Supernatural weren't just scary, they were lonely. They were about two people who had no one in the world but each other, driving from nowhere to nowhere, sleeping in motels that smelled like cigarettes, eating diner food, fighting things that no one else believed in and no one else could stop. That isolation was the heart of the show. And now, in this comic, in this gap between seasons that felt like holding your breath, that loneliness gets one more story. One more dark room. One more thing that shouldn't exist. Except this time, the thing that shouldn't exist was made in a lab. It raises a question that lingers long after you've thought about it. Did Supernatural miss a huge opportunity by never going here during its original run? 15 seasons, 327 episodes. And in all of that, no one ever pointed Sam and Dean at a machine and said, "Figure it out." Is it possible that the show's greatest untapped story was always the one that had nothing to do with the supernatural at all? That the scariest thing the Winchester brothers could face was something built by human hands, with no weakness written in any ancient text, no soul to be saved, no monster to be mourned? Maybe that's exactly right. Or maybe the show knew, on some level, that when you finally tell that story, you need it to hit perfectly. You need the timing, the characters, the emotional context all aligned. And maybe the comic is exactly where that story was always supposed to live. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you have wanted this in the show itself? Is this the episode or the arc that Supernatural always needed? Because if you ask me, the answer isn't as simple as yes or no. And that's exactly why this story matters.